Rougarou is a large looping coaster at Cedar Point. Built by Bolliger Mabillard, this ride has been a floorless coaster for the past decade, but it originally opened as a stand-up coaster known as Mantis. Did this improve the ride? Find out in this review. In 1996, Cedar Point opened Mantis. The ride was originally supposed to be known as Banshee, but the park drew criticism for the dark theme, so they changed the name to Mantis, which was fitting given the riding position. Interestingly, Cedar Fair would eventually reuse the Banshee name 2 decades later for Kings Island. This would also be a B&M looper, just this time an inverted coaster. Mantis was Cedar Point's second consecutive coaster from Swiss manufacturer Bolliger Mabillard, or B&M. Since this park loves records, this fittingly opened as the tallest, fastest, and longest stand-up coaster in the world. But these records did not last long. Kentucky Kingdom snagged them all with Chang in 1997, and then Six Flags Magic Mountain took them with Riddler's Revenge in 1998, and this rise held them ever since. The main reason for that is because stand-up coasters are a dying breed. Dozens of stand-up coasters were built in the 1980s and 1990s. But until SeaWorld Orlando opened Pipeline in 2023, there had not been an all-new stand-up coaster built since 1999. Stand-up coasters were a highly marketable gimmick, but these coasters did not have staying power. Mantis was a perfect example of this. While the coaster drew sizable crowds in its early years, its popularity waned by the 2010s. Many guests found the riding position uncomfortable. The large, hard over-the-shoulder restraints could lead to headbanging. The bike seat that guests straddled could crush your groin if it was positioned too high. Then the standing position caused the ride's high positive G-forces to be translated directly to your feet. Not everyone liked this sensation. Stand-up coasters also had more complicated restraints due to the amount of adjustability, leading to slower dispatches and a lower hourly throughput. To remedy these issues, Cedar Point gave Mantis a huge refurbishment before the 2015 season. The ride was transformed into Rougarou, which is French for werewolf. This replaced the stand-up trains with sit-down floorless trains. This was a positive change for most guests. So much so that a few other B&M stand-ups followed suit with the same conversion. California's Great America turned Vortex into Patriot for the 2017 season. Then Six Flags America turned Apocalypse into Firebird for the 2019 season. Both were also considered upgrades by most. Along with the train change, Rougarou also received a brand new look. Rougarou has dark orange track and teal supports. It's a more mundane paint scheme than it had originally. I personally preferred the more colorful look of Mantis. That ride had red and yellow track with blue supports. Rougarou still looks cool though because of the placement. There is no theming, but a decent chunk of the layout is placed directly above water. The queue was also placed on these floating barges, so you may feel them bob as you make your way through it. Then the entry plaza and queue line routes you past the ride's first half, giving you some great photo opportunities. Typically, you will not spend long in that queue though. Rougarou often has one of the shortest waits for the park's major coasters. Most days, the line maxes out at 15 to 20 minutes. It is included in the park's paid fast lane skip the line service if needed, but that comes in handy for the other coasters more than this one. This ride's wait can balloon on days when the park is slammed, but I guarantee you it will be shorter than the park's other headlining coasters. Part of that is this ride's capacity. Each train seats up to 32 riders, as they are comprised of 8 rows of 4. Then this ride has 3 trains, and frequently runs all 3 at once. That was another upgrade from Mantis. While that coaster had 3 trains, it operated with just 2 for much of its life. It simply was not possible to dispatch the stand-up trains fast enough to make 3 train operations viable. With the easier floorless trains, Rougarou can actually keep 3 trains moving at a steady clip, giving the ride a higher hourly throughput. Riders are restrained by over-the-shoulder restraints, similar to most older B&M loopers. These are hard, so it can be uncomfortable if you hit your head. While the first half is smooth, the constant directional changes in the second half can throw your head sideways, so I would recommend leaning forwards during this part to mitigate discomfort. The forces feel fairly similar for me across the train, but I have a slight preference for the front for the unobstructed view. You are free to wait for any row you'd like once you reach the station, so I will usually wait for the front if it's just an extra train. Once dispatched, you turn slightly left and ascend the 145-foot or 44-meter tall lift hill. Your views are relatively limited on the ascent due to the ride's placement, but you get a gorgeous view overlooking the park and peninsula once you reach the top. You then get a few extra seconds to take in the view because there is a pre-drop. You turn around 180 degrees while dipping down and up. This builds up a little speed into the drop. This is a large straight plunge. While this type of drop offers nice airtime in some other B&M loopers, you have to remember this ride was originally designed as a stand-up. B&M did not put much airtime into these rides. As a result, Rougarou's drop is not overly steep, but you can get some weak floater at least in the very back row. It's more notable for the speed you build up. This is followed by a colossal vertical loop. It offers solid, sustained, positive Gs, so I typically start to gray out a bit. Next is a dive loop. It is fluid, but the flip is fairly sterile. You do get a decent blast of positive Gs in the following valley at least. Then comes a turnaround positioned above the station. It is uniquely profiled, but it doesn't do too much in my opinion. It has no real force to it. It exists solely to turn you around in the opposite direction. Thankfully, Rougarou follows up with the best element by far, the inclined loop. This offers incredibly strong positive Gs. You are plastered against your seat. B&M has not used this element much over the years, which is an absolute shame, but they did add one in the new for 2024 Iron Menace at Dorney Park, so maybe more will come. Rougarou then has a low S-hill. This offers an okay burst of airtime for all. You then have a forceful twist upwards into the mid-course brake run, and the entry into this is so sharp that it offers an abrupt pop of airtime. You then have the mid-course brake run. This will slow the train down a bit, but not too much. The second half then kicks things off with another straight drop. This again offers some light floater in the back row. Next is the fourth and final inversion, a corkscrew. This is fairly whippy, and the X is a good head chopper with a track piece later in the ride. This is followed by a turnaround. This does not offer much in my opinion though. Then there's another S-hill, which offers a blend of weak negative Gs and laterals. It's a fun little element. You then have another mild turnaround and a tame rightward turn into the brakes. To be blunt, I'm not a big fan of Rougarou's finale. The twisty elements are different than a lot of other B&M loopers, but the elements do not offer much in terms of forces. It feels like the park added this section for the sole purpose of getting the length record for the genre, when Mantis was originally built. Worse, the constant directional changes can lead to headbanging if you're not careful. There are some nice head choppers at least. You then return to the station, ending the 3,900-foot or 1,200 meter long coaster. So, what would I rate Rougarou? I would give this coaster a 6 out of 10. This is a decent floorless coaster. I like most of the inversions, particularly that inclined loop. That is a standout element. Then there are a few fun S-hills mixed into the layout. But this ride has some flaws. The pacing is uneven, as there are a handful of turns that are simply duds. And you also want to lean forwards, particularly in the second half, otherwise you can get headbanging. This is a fine looping coaster, and something I'll ride at least once when I'm at Cedar Point, but I prefer to take my time re-riding the park's better coasters. Now, I never rode this as Mantis, but I suspect I would have enjoyed the experience more back then. It would have been more unique and amplified the forces in my opinion. I have developed a technique to ride B&M stand-up coasters that eliminates much of the discomfort. I place the bike seat as low as possible, and then I jam the restraints into my shoulders. This eliminates crotch and head pain. This is why I've enjoyed similar rides like Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure and Riddler's Revenge at Six Flags Magic Mountain. But I get why Cedar Point made the change, because most people do not use this technique and come off in discomfort. I heard Mantis' second half was particularly problematic, which is not surprising given how you can still hit your head even with the floorless trains, which are far more forgiving. I do wonder about Rougarou's long-term prospects though. This ride occupies a large plot of land, and it does not seem as popular as the park's other headliners. Now I know it eats through a lot of people, which contributes to the relatively short wait, but no one ever has this as one of their favorite rides at the park. It purely is a supporting coaster. Considering how landlocked Cedar Point is, I could see this ride potentially leaving in the next 10 to 15 years when the park wants to add another big coaster if they need to open up a big plot of land. So those are my thoughts on Rougarou at Cedar Point. What are your thoughts on this ride? Do you prefer it as a stand-up or as a floorless coaster? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you consider subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.